Millbrook was one of those small New England towns where everyone knows each other, where time flows slower than elsewhere, and where autumn paints maple alleys in bright shades of red and gold. The ancient elementary school building, constructed at the end of the 19th century, towered over Maple Street like a stern guardian of children's dreams and hopes. The autumn sun flooded the art classroom with soft light, casting eerie shadows from empty easels. The air held a faint scent of paint and graphite dust from pencils. Sarah Mitchell sat at her desk, methodically sorting through student works. Her movements were mechanical, honed by years of teaching routine. Take a drawing, evaluate composition, grade it, put it in the right folder. Everything had its place, its order. It was in this predictability that she found solace over the last 4 years, since a car accident took her husband. Order and routine had become her protective wall against the chaos of loss. The silence of the classroom was broken only by the soft shuffle of sneakers on the floor. Tommy Parker, one of her quietest students, approached the desk with a sheet of paper in his hands. He had always been a thoughtful boy, but today there was something unusual in his eyes, a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. "Miss Mitchell," he whispered, extending the drawing to her, "I drew you." Sarah took the sheet. The portrait was done by a child's hand, but with remarkable accuracy for a 10-year-old boy. She recognized her posture, the characteristic tilt of her head, even her hair that she always gathered in a neat bun. But something in the drawing made her heart skip a beat. Behind her was a barely visible, blurred figure drawn in gray pencil. "This is a very interesting work, Tommy," she said, trying to maintain a professional tone. "But why did you add this shadow behind?" The boy just shrugged, his gaze becoming even more distant. "I draw what I see," he simply replied and returned to his seat, leaving Sarah alone with an inexplicable sense of unease. She opened the desk drawer to hide the drawing but hesitated. Something about this figure seemed painfully familiar. The rational part of her mind tried to explain it away as rich, childish imagination, but another part, the one she had been carefully suppressing for years, felt this was just the beginning. Sarah quickly stuffed the drawing into the drawer and returned to grading works. But now her movements had lost their certainty, and her gaze would involuntarily return to that spot in the drawing where the dark figure stood behind her back. The whole day had been gloomy. Heavy clouds hung over the school, and even the bright children's drawings on the classroom walls seemed dimmer than usual. Sarah was just finishing cleaning the brushes after the last lesson when Mrs. Henderson entered the classroom with a package of school photographs. "Your annual photos, Miss Mitchell," said the secretary, placing the envelope on the desk. "They turned out particularly well this year." Sarah thanked her and, left alone, took out the photos. The sun had almost set and long shadows crept across the classroom floor. She went to the window to better examine the photographs in the remaining daylight. Her gaze stopped on the group photo. Something was wrong. Behind her, between two classroom windows, there was a dark figure, blurry, but unmistakably human. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. With trembling fingers, she pulled Tommy's drawing from the drawer. The same outline, the same pose. She looked at other photographs, the 5th grade group shot, photos from the school play, but there were no dark spots or defects on them. A sudden gust of wind moved the curtains, and Sarah flinched. In the window's reflection, for a moment, she thought she saw the dark figure standing right behind her. She turned sharply. The classroom was empty, but the air felt thicker, heavier, as if someone invisible had filled the space with their presence. "It's just a coincidence. This can't be real," she whispered to herself. Her rational mind desperately searched for a logical explanation. Sarah took out her phone. If she took a selfie right now, and there was nothing in it, this would prove it was all just her imagination. A simple, logical solution. Yes, that's exactly what she needed to do. With trembling hands, she raised the phone. The same shadow appeared on the screen, now clearer, with more defined contours. She dropped the phone on the desk and stepped back. For the first time in 4 years, her carefully constructed wall of rationality began to crack, and the reality she had so diligently tried to control started crumbling like a house of cards. Sarah tried to focus on the road as she drove home that evening. The streetlights of Millbrook cast yellow circles of light on the wet asphalt. It had been drizzling all day. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying not to think about what she had seen in the classroom. But the image of the dark figure haunted her, appearing either in the rearview mirror or in the reflections of oncoming headlights. Her house, an old Victorian cottage on the outskirts of town, greeted her with its usual silence. The click of the light switch dispelled the darkness in the living room. Sarah mechanically performed her evening rituals, hanging up her coat, putting on the kettle, checking the mail. Anything to avoid looking at the windows where her reflection was visible in the darkness. But when she finally made it to the bathroom, washing the day's fatigue from her face, it happened again. In the mirror, behind her back, a blurred spot appeared. At first indistinct, it gradually took on the shape of a human figure. Sarah froze, unable to look away from the mirror. Her heart was pounding so hard it seemed to echo off the tiled walls. In an instant, the spot vanished. Sarah spun around sharply, but the bathroom was empty. Only water dripped from the loosely tightened faucet, marking seconds in the silence. She quickly finished her routine and hurried to the bedroom. But even there, in her safest refuge, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer alone. Something had changed in the air itself. It had become thicker, heavier, filled with an invisible presence. That night, Sarah lay awake for a long time. She lay in bed, staring into the darkness, and for the first time in 4 years allowed herself to think about David, about his warm smile, about how he always knew what to say when she was struggling, about that last morning when he left for work. Sarah abruptly cut off that thought. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The following days became a test of her endurance. The shadow began appearing more frequently, in store windows as she walked to work, in the rearview mirror as she parked her car. Sarah tried to ignore it, throwing herself into work with double energy. She stayed late at school, filling her evenings with grading papers and lesson preparation. At home, she began avoiding mirrors, covering reflective surfaces with fabric. But it didn't help. The presence became more palpable. Sometimes, she thought she heard footsteps in the empty hallway or felt a light breath on her neck while sitting at her desk. And the silhouette. The silhouette was becoming more familiar, though she refused to acknowledge this even to herself. One day, when the last rays of October's sun painted the classroom in warm amber hues, an incident occurred that made Sarah doubt her own sanity. She stayed after classes, preparing for the parent-teacher meeting, arranging children's drawings on the boards. The school corridors were empty, with only the muffled sounds of janitors coming from the distant wing of the building. Suddenly, the classroom grew noticeably colder. Sarah felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She turned and saw Tommy standing in the doorway, clutching his sketchbook. His face was pale, his eyes wide open. "Tommy, what are you doing here so late?" Sarah asked, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Your husband is very worried about you," the boy said quietly, almost in a whisper. The words fell into the classroom, silence like stones into deep water. Sarah froze, feeling the blood drain from her face. Time seemed to stop. A dead silence fell in the classroom. Even the sounds from the corridor suddenly ceased. What did you say?" Her voice sounded foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. But Tommy just blinked, his gaze becoming confused. "What? I just wanted to show you my new drawing." He looked puzzled, as if he had just woken up from a deep sleep. Sarah felt her legs giving way. She grabbed the edge of the desk to maintain balance. The air in the classroom had become so thick it was hard to breathe. And behind Tommy, in the dark doorway, she thought she saw the familiar shadow pass by. That evening, sitting in her car in the empty school parking lot, Sarah allowed tears to flow freely for the first time in 4 years. Her carefully constructed world, where everything had a logical explanation, was falling apart before her eyes. But maybe, she thought, wiping her eyes, maybe it was time to stop running from what she had been trying to forget for so long. In the following days, Sarah began noticing changes not only around her but in her own behavior. She caught herself talking out loud in the empty apartment, as if expecting a response. Sometimes she would stop in the middle of a task, feeling an invisible gaze. Once, she even left 2 coffee cups on the kitchen table instead of her usual one. The shadow now appeared more frequently, especially in moments of greatest solitude. Sarah noticed it in the empty school corridor when she stayed late, in the dark corner of her bedroom when she woke up at night. Turn her head, and it would vanish. But the sense of presence remained, creating a strange mixture of fear and something akin to comfort. One evening, while sorting through old papers in her desk drawer, she came across their last photo together with David. They were so happy that day. A picnic in the park, sunshine, laughter. Sarah ran her fingers over her husband's smiling face and suddenly felt the temperature in the room drop sharply. The air thickened, and in the mirror, she saw it, the clear, distinct figure of a man in a blue sweater. Her heart stopped. The same sweater she had given him on their last anniversary. The same tilt of his head, the same posture. Sarah turned slowly. The classroom was empty, but she could have sworn she felt a light breath on her cheek. That familiar cologne scent. "David?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion she had tried to suppress for so long. There was no answer, but when she looked in the mirror again, the silhouette became even clearer, and there was something in its pose. Something so characteristic of David that there was no room left for doubt. Her rational mind still resisted, but her heart already knew the truth. Time seemed frozen in the empty school corridor. Shadows from the windows created an eerie pattern on the floor, while the last rays of sunlight painted the walls in warm amber hues. Sarah stood motionless, feeling each beat of her heart echo in the silence. David's image before her became clearer, every feature of his face, every wrinkle at the corners of his eyes, even that particular tilt of his head when he listened to her with complete attention. Years of loneliness and suppressed emotions finally broke through. Tears rolled down her face, but she no longer tried to hold them back. Each tear washed away a piece of the armor she had so carefully built around herself all these years. She spoke of her loneliness, not with words, but with feelings that overwhelmed her heart. About empty evenings when the silence became unbearable, about moments of triumph she had no one to share with, about the fear of opening her heart again, which had frozen her soul. The air around her grew warmer, filled with ineffable tenderness. Sarah felt his protective presence, as strong as when he was alive. In this moment, she understood he had never left her. He had been there during every difficult moment, protecting, supporting, even when she refused to acknowledge it. "I think I'm ready now," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet determination. "You taught me how to love, and now I must learn to live again. I'll manage." David looked at her with the tenderness and pride he had always shown in the most important moments of their life. His hand slowly rose to her face. She didn't feel the touch, just a light, cool breath on her cheek, but it was enough. His eyes spoke everything that didn't need to be said aloud. His silhouette began to fade in the twilight, like morning mist under the sun's rays. But his smile, that same familiar, warm smile, lingered the longest before dissolving into the evening haze. The feeling of his presence hung in the air for a long time, mixed with the aroma of autumn evening seeping through the open windows. Sarah stood in the corridor, feeling how the heavy burden of the past gradually released her heart, leaving behind a bright sadness and quiet gratitude. The next morning, When she entered the classroom, sunlight flooded the room, creating a completely different mood than yesterday. On her desk lay a new drawing from Tommy. This time, it showed only her, surrounded by bright, warm autumn colors. No dark silhouettes, no shadows, just light and life. Sarah ran her fingers over the drawing, and for the first time in a long while allowed herself to smile, truly smile, feeling the warmth of the new day warming her from within.